There's a moment that probably feels familiar. You're lying in bed, the room is dark, the day is over, and your mind decides that right now is the perfect time to replay something that happened 3 days ago. Not something catastrophic, not a life-altering event, just a small thing. A comment you made during a meeting. The way you laughed a little too loudly at someone's joke. A text message you sent that could have been worded differently. Something that, by any reasonable measure, doesn't matter anymore. But your brain didn't get that memo. So it runs the scene again, then again. It imagines alternate versions, better responses, smoother moments. It asks questions that have no real answers. Did they think that was weird? Did I come across wrong? Why did I phrase it like that? And before you know it, an hour has passed and you're still mentally editing a conversation that ended days ago with someone who has almost certainly already forgotten it. Most people who experience this know, on some level, that it's irrational. They know the small thing doesn't deserve this much attention. They know that replaying it won't change anything. And yet, the thinking keeps going. It loops. It circles back. It finds new angles to examine. It refuses to close. That gap, between knowing it's unnecessary and being unable to stop anyway, is where something deeply interesting about human psychology lives. Because overthinking small things isn't a flaw in logic. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not even, in most cases, a sign that something is wrong with a person. It's the result of several very real, very human mechanisms running exactly the way they were designed to run, just in the wrong context. The mind has a function that psychologists sometimes call an open loop. When something is unresolved, incomplete, or uncertain, the brain tends to keep returning to it. This isn't random. It's purposeful. For most of human history, leaving things unresolved could be dangerous. An unresolved threat meant a threat that was still present. An unresolved social conflict could mean exclusion from the group, which in earlier environments wasn't just uncomfortable, it was genuinely life-threatening. So the brain developed a habit of staying alert to anything that hadn't been fully processed, fully understood, or fully closed. The problem is that this system doesn't always distinguish between a genuine threat and a mildly awkward comment you made at dinner. It treats uncertainty the same way regardless of scale. If something feels unfinished, if there's a question that hasn't been answered, if a social interaction ended in a way that felt even slightly ambiguous, the loop stays open. And an open loop is a loop the mind keeps returning to, almost automatically, looking for resolution that may never actually arrive. This is part of why the overthinking tends to focus so heavily on social situations. People replay conversations more than they replay, say, a moment when they tripped on the sidewalk. Because social judgment carries a weight that physical awkwardness usually doesn't. Humans are deeply social creatures, and the question of how others perceive us is one the brain takes extremely seriously. Not because people are vain or insecure in some simple way, but because social acceptance has always mattered in a very fundamental sense. Being seen positively, being included, being understood, these things are connected to something much older than modern social anxiety. They connect back to survival itself. So when a social moment feels uncertain, when you're not entirely sure how it landed, when the other person's reaction was a little ambiguous, the brain flags it. It wants to understand what happened. It wants to know whether the situation is safe. And without a clear answer, it keeps scanning, keeps analyzing, keeps replaying the moment hoping to find something it missed. What makes this particularly exhausting is that the analysis rarely resolves anything. You can replay the same conversation 20 times and still not know for certain what the other person was thinking. You can imagine every possible interpretation of a look someone gave you and still land on uncertainty. The mind is searching for a definitive answer to a question that, in most cases, simply doesn't have one. And so the loop continues, not because the person is failing to think clearly, but because the mechanism is working exactly as intended. It just has nowhere to land. There's also something worth noting about the kinds of people who tend to overthink small things. Most intensely, it's rarely people who don't care about others more often. It's people who care quite a lot. People who are perceptive, who pay attention to nuance, who are genuinely concerned with how they affect the people around them. The same sensitivity that makes someone thoughtful and emotionally aware is often the same sensitivity that makes a minor social moment feel significant enough to examine repeatedly. The overthinking isn't separate from the caring. In many cases, it's an expression of it. This doesn't make it comfortable, but it does shift the frame slightly. The person lying awake analyzing a two-sentence exchange isn't broken. There's someone whose mind takes human connection seriously enough to keep examining it, even when the rational part of the brain has long since moved on. There's another layer here that doesn't get talked about as often. Overthinking small things is sometimes less about the small thing itself and more about a deeper discomfort with uncertainty. For some people, the act of analyzing, of turning something over and examining it from every angle, creates a temporary sense of control. If I think about it enough, maybe I'll understand it. If I find the right explanation, maybe I'll feel settled. The thinking feels like doing something, even when it isn't actually resolving anything. This is one of the quieter paradoxes of overthinking. It can feel productive. It can feel like careful consideration. But it often functions as a way of sitting with discomfort while doing just enough mental activity to avoid fully feeling it. The loop isn't always searching for an answer. Sometimes it's just a way of staying busy inside uncertainty, rather than letting the uncertainty simply exist. And uncertainty for many overthinkers is genuinely difficult to tolerate. Not because they're fragile, but because their minds are wired to seek clarity, to understand, to make sense of things. When something doesn't make sense, or when the outcome of a situation remains unknown, the default move is to think more, to analyze further, to find the missing piece that will finally make everything add up. The idea that some things simply won't resolve, that some questions don't have answers, that some interactions will remain permanently ambiguous, that can feel deeply uncomfortable for a mind that is always looking for patterns and meaning. Here's where the frame shifts again, though, because there's an assumption embedded in most conversations about overthinking, which is that the small thing doesn't really matter, that the mind is wasting energy on something trivial. And in a literal sense, that may be true. The specific comment, the specific moment, the specific awkward pause, none of that is likely to have lasting consequences. But the overthinking itself isn't really about the small thing. It's a signal about what the person values. It's a symptom of how seriously they take their relationships, their reputation, their impact on others. When someone spends an hour replaying a moment, they're revealing something about what matters to them. They're showing that connection matters, that being understood matters, that being perceived well, not out of vanity, but out of genuine care, matters. The small thing is just the surface. Underneath it is usually something much more meaningful. A person who takes their relationships seriously, who worries about the impression they leave, who wants to show up well for the people in their life. The overthinking is a misdirected version of something that, at its root, is not a flaw at all. That doesn't mean it's pleasant. It doesn't mean it serves people well to lie awake analyzing something no one else remembers. But understanding where it comes from changes the relationship to it even slightly. It becomes less about a mind that is malfunctioning and more about a mind that is doing something recognizable and human, just without an off switch. Most people who overthink small things already know, somewhere beneath the analysis, that the moment has passed, that the other person isn't thinking about it, that the world has continued without waiting for their internal review to conclude. The knowing is there. It just doesn't always reach the part of the mind that's still turning the moment over, still looking for the resolution that would finally allow the loop to close. Maybe that's the most honest place to leave this. Not with a solution, not with a technique, just with a clearer picture of what's actually happening. The mind isn't betraying you when it won't let go of something small. It's doing what minds do, looking for safety, looking for understanding, looking for closure in a world that doesn't always offer it cleanly, and sometimes, recognizing that the loop was never really about the small thing is the closest thing to peace the mind can find.